Good morning to you. It is Saturday, December 3rd. I'm Abby Huntsman. Did you hear the news? There is an international crisis on our hands. Well, at least that is what the left is saying. President-elect Donald Trump takes a phone call from the president of Taiwan, and the media goes insane. What they're saying and what it means. Straight ahead.
That's right. And we traded him for 5 of the Taliban's worst. But this morning, Army deserter Bo Bergdahl wants a taste of freedom himself. He's begging, of course, for a pardon.
And he was the last best hope for the chairman of the Democratic Party. We don't even need
We're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House!
We all
tape
knew
has
what was
been
coming.
played so many times, it was frozen.
Like an old
If he was
VHS.
their first pick, who was their second? Because Howard Dean just dropped out. Fox and Friends starts right now.
She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night.
It's only 6 in the morning.
But
I don't
he's
even know what
excited.
that was. He slipped a disc. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome into Fox and Friends on this Saturday morning. Abby, Pete, Clayton, nice to see all of you.
Good to be here today. Good to see you, too.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into it. Last night I was with the kids at the zoo. You know, this little Christmas tree lighting thing, and they like decorate the whole zoo. And I got I got an alert sent to me on my watch from the New York Times app, as if this was breaking news. It was a huge story last night, enough that they would send me an alert on my watch that the world was about to end because how Trump's calls to world leaders is going to upset decades of diplomacy because of taking a phone call from Taiwan.
Well, that's exactly right. So we've got a long relationship with China, with the island of Taiwan, which we've had strained relationships with. We have a one China policy. We can get into the details. We don't have to. But the reality is, Donald Trump took a phone call from the president of Taiwan, and she was newly elected and a little bit more independent-minded. And you know, as he has, he's entertaining world leaders as they come across. But if you listen to the media coverage of that conversation,
Pete, I thought
you'd think the world was ending.
I was just going to say, I thought the world was coming to an end.
I was getting watch alerts. What the heck?
I was at dinner with my parents last night, too, and I saw it was trending on Twitter. And you mentioned the New York Times headline. This is from Politico saying, bull in a China shop. Trump risks diplomatic blow-up in Asia. L.A. Times. Did Trump just cause a diplomatic crisis over Taiwan? And then, of course, CNN. Trump risks showdown with China after call with Taiwan.
And then Democrats, of course, jumping right on this. And Senator Chris Murphy tweeting this. What has happened in the last 48 hours is not a shift. These are major pivots in foreign policy without any plan. That's how wars start. But then Donald Trump defending all this. Look, he said, like, this was just a phone call. She called me to congratulate me on becoming the president of the United States. It was a simple, nice phone call. He said this, the president of Taiwan called me today to wish me congratulations on winning the presidency. And he also congratulated her on becoming the president.
And he also noted in this second tweet that it's interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I should not accept a congratulatory call. There's a tap dance on Taiwan. We have a relationship with China. China doesn't recognize Taiwan as an independent island. Taiwan wants more freedom from China. It's a lot. It's very complicated.
But we defend their
We've defended their sovereignty in the past. A guy like Chris Murphy, listen, he fancies himself a foreign policy intelligentsia, as does the New York Times and everyone. Listen, he's the president-elect. He's taking phone calls from foreign leaders. He's not going to start World War III. He's having a conversation with people that are reaching out to him, and now's the time to do it if you're going to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think everyone
spent a lot of time.
I spent a lot of time living over in Beijing.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to calm down because I think this is an example of what has played out over this entire campaign. The minute that Mr. Trump does something a little bit different than what we've seen in the past, which is also the reason why many people like Mr. Trump, they go in this frenzy and they make it sound like this world is coming to an end and we're starting World War III. Let me just clarify to everyone listening out there, we are not going to war. Nothing is probably going to happen from this. If anything, I think many people find this sort of thing refreshing from President-elect Donald Trump, because you think about Taiwan and their values and how they're much more lined up with American values. That being said, he's not sworn in yet. I think once you get into office, you've got to get a better understanding of China-Taiwan relations, because it is, as you mentioned, a very delicate balance. They're our number one trading partner. You want to make sure.
But he was critical of China throughout the entire campaign, so he's not afraid. I think the media wants to paint him as a little bit of a loose cannon. Where's he going to go? What's he going to do? He's going to take phone calls from Taiwan now? This is out of control.
Or this headline is, Trump sides with a free, democratic country, small d democratic country, communists freak out.
Right.
I mean, in what world is that actually a bad thing. I understand the trading partner side, but they're trying to discredit him, which is exactly what it is. He's taking phone calls, engaging in a conversation, and a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of a shuffle. He's a negotiator. You want to set those terms. You don't want China to think you're going to fall into the old patterns. And I think that's part of it too. He's not taking this phone call by accident. He's receiving it, appreciating it, I'm sure. But he knows what he and his advisors know what they're doing.
Also, what about when President Obama renewed relationships with Cuba? Do you remember that? Just recently?
Right.
Was there this hysteria?
No,
I mean,
the left
just
was
wondering,
praising him for it.
because I always try to put Mr. Trump in someone else's shoes, like a past president, and how the media responded to that to get a better sense of the hypocrisy.
Okay.
And
you want to do that?
point.
Let's do that on this next story, because I think this
point.
is interesting. And over the past few days, obviously, the Carrier story out of Indiana has made headlines. And I think it's interesting to watch how the left has responded to this story, because this is particularly the area where the left praised President Obama in sort of picking winners in jobs, right? He was picking different solar companies. And the left, I've seen over the past few days, has actually been praising President Trump, or President-elect Trump, for this move in the Carrier plants. But then you have people like Sarah Palin coming out, writing opinion pieces, slamming President-elect Trump for this move to trying to save jobs, saying that this is crony capitalism, that the government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers and these sort of backroom deals. Well, President-elect Trump is at it again with another company this morning.
No, listen, you can make arguments both ways, and people have. But the reality is Donald Trump became president-elect, made phone calls, and Carrier is keeping jobs here. And people like that, want that. They want those jobs here. He tweeted yesterday about another company in Indiana, which is about a mile down the road from Carrier. It's called Rexnord. And he said this of Rexnord, and I believe they manufacture rollerball bearings or bearings, of Indiana, is moving to Mexico and rather viciously firing all of its 300 workers. This is happening all over our country. No more. So he hasn't talked more about what that's going to mean, but the signal is still clear. And
that's right.
We're going to change the policies, and I will intervene individually with companies to make sure that they stay here. And to the American worker, to the people that elected him,
well,
these
1,100 Carrier employees, of course, I mean, it's like Christmas for them, right? I mean, this is...
They thought they were losing their jobs.
They don't have to worry about losing their jobs and know how they're going to be able to put presents under the Christmas tree this year during the holiday season. But it is interesting to see what sort of deals. Is the president-elect going to be doing this all over the country individually with different companies? Again, you had Sarah Palin coming out saying this is not the government's job to be picking winners and losers. You're going to go to this individual company.
Well, he's going to have to figure out the best balance there, because you want, most importantly, you want to incentivize these companies to keep their jobs here. You don't want to threaten. You don't want to get in the business of threatening.
But how? Because when you look at the company that runs Carrier, they have defense contracts. So, hey, if you're going to move these 1,100 jobs to Mexico, well, you know, that defense contract that you were going to be receiving millions of dollars in.
But see, what Trump is siding on the side of is business, not regulations. So what you had with Obama before was ideological interest on climate change and regulatory interest that he was focused. It wasn't a pro-business agenda, and he was shoehorning things. Whereas Trump's trying to say, I just want to open it up and make it competitive. I want to make sure Rexnord and Carrier have a competitive environment so they don't go to Mexico where they pay $250 an hour instead of here. So he's going to change that in the long term, but in the short term, he's trying to stem the tide of companies.
But to what he was tweeting about, I mean, what we're faced with today are lost jobs. You think about from 2000, we've lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. That's because they've gone overseas. Also because of robots that are taking over a lot of jobs that people have done for years and years. That's going to be one of Mr. Trump's biggest challenges going forward, is how do you convince these companies to keep these jobs right here at home?
Yes. And if Apple wants to shift manufacturing back to the United States, and will it be robots, not humans there? So it'll be an interesting battle.
So this is a political debate. It will continue. And there's obviously another side of this argument, which are the Democrats, and which traditionally fancy themselves the party of the working man. But they're in disarray themselves.
Oh, they are?
Really? Oh. You didn't get the headline?
Well, you have donors that are basically saying, wait a second, we don't know where to put our money right now. You're asking us now to help rebuild a party that, you guys totally let us down. That's right. Howard Dean has now dropped his bid. I think the Democrats thought that Howard Dean was going to be the knight going to ride in on the back of a horse.
If that's your white knight.
Well, he's saying they need to start from the bottom.
Yeah, he's saying, you know what, you got to get rid of these top guys.
Right, we've hit rock bottom as a party. You've got to get someone that can build it up from a grassroots level, which I think he's right about that, because that's where they got it all wrong in this last campaign, was the grassroots level.
Of course. No, they've hit rock bottom. He's hit rock bottom because he dropped out himself. And their number 2 in Keith Ellison is now under question, very much so, for comments he's made, anti-Semitic comments that he's made about Israel and the conspiracy that they're controlling our foreign policy. We're going to get into that a little bit more in the show.
Well,
he's a far-left hardliner who's been associated with far-left groups, including anti-Semitic groups, made comments about having a segregated state in the South in the past. And as a Minnesotan, I'm familiar with Keith Ellison. The guy is on the fringes and associates with some, shall we say, interesting groups.
They need to start fresh.
Yeah, that's not a fresh start.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Always better to start fresh.
Let us know your thoughts on all of these things we've been talking about this morning. Friends at foxnews.com. We're going to have a great debate about it later in the show.
A lot of news going on this morning. We do have some other headlines to get to, beginning with a Fox News alert. And this is a sad story. A horrific bus crash in Texas, smashing into an 18-wheeler, sending at least 8 high school cheerleaders to the hospital. They were returning home from a football game in West Texas, and 2 of those teens now in critical condition, 2 others in serious condition. Texas state troopers are on the scene right now trying to figure out what exactly went wrong. We'll keep a close eye on that one. And we traded him for 5 of the Taliban's worst, but now disgraced Army deserter Bo Bergdahl wants his own taste of freedom. Bergdahl asking President Obama for a full pardon that him once before he leaves office. That request part of a letter thanking the president for rescuing him through that very controversial prisoner swap. Bergdahl faces life in prison for abandoning his post in Afghanistan. His twice-delayed court-martial is set for May 15th. And election officials in Michigan will start recounting votes as early as Tuesday. And this despite President-elect Donald Trump filing a lawsuit to block the challenge spearheaded by Green Party candidate Jill Stein. But the election board was deadlocked on his request, allowing the recount to move forward. Recounting votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania will cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Well, cheers to this for a Christmas tree. More than 400 kegs stacked 26 feet into the air, lighting up the sky in Rochester, New York. The Genesee Brewery has been making the aluminum tree outside of their brew house for years now. And this time, they even added an extra 1,500 feet of lights, cinching the light show to Christmas carols. Hundreds gathered in the cold to check out the lighting and enjoyed the brew house new barrel-aged beer last night.
Wow. The tree just got 10 feet higher.
Rick celebrates that every year. That's where you don't go to the Rockefeller one, you go to the beer one.
I was actually wondering if, like, tomorrow I could have, like, an on-location hit.
Oh, let's think about that.
I just approved it.
Producers, you heard it. You heard it. I'll sample for you all morning long. All right, so, Clayton, I know you're obsessed with meteorological seasons, as I am. So meteorological winter began on December 1st. Winter really hasn't hit the U.S. yet. All the cold air has still been bottled way up towards the north. Alaska, -6 in Fairbanks. But get ready. That air is going to come down here, and we're going to start to see our first big batch of really cold air across the western U.S. over the next couple of days. Here's your current temperatures. Cold out west, but nothing that's that bad. Watch what happens this week. We're going to go start Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You get the idea. The cold air comes in. This isn't record-breaking cold, but it is certainly the first cold that we've had this year. And we're even going to see at night, I think, some low temperatures down across the deep south and into Florida that are below freezing. A lot of rain today across parts of Texas. We might even see some flooding with this. Snow back across the northern side of this. And get ready. Much of the deep south needs more rain. Had all this rain this week, guys, with those tornadoes and the beneficial rain for the fires. Maybe another 3 inches for some of that fire-prone area this week, which is good news.
Wow. It's good to have you back in studio, not out there holding balloons or something.
Or going off the side of a building. Like
I super agree.
You've been a busy man.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good stuff, Rick.
All right, well, General James Mattis will be the man in charge of the Pentagon as Secretary of Defense, but who's going to lead the State Department? Is it going to be Rudy Petraeus, Corker Romney, or maybe someone else? Our next guest, who worked on President Bush's White House, has the inside scoop on that.
And flag fury overtaking a college campus after it took down.
As our Secretary of Defense.
In true fashion, that was President-elect Donald Trump announcing General James Mattis as the man to lead the Pentagon the other night.
But his decision on who will lead the State Department yet to be made. So who could it be? Here with insight on potential picks, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp. Nice to see you this morning, Mercedes.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, so let's dive into it. Who do you think will be at the top of the State Department list?
That is the. Can I just say that has to be the $1 million question of the year?
You don't have the
so
answer?
Whoever can
That's why
answer
we
that,
put you today.
I'm telling you, it's going to be. It's been a fascinating, what I call almost suspenseful decision-making process coming out of the Trump Tower for the Secretary of State. You know, I do believe that John Bolton actually would be a very solid pick for Donald Trump. He has experience as a diplomat, worked within the State Department as well as the United Nations. And I also think he has a very clear understanding of America first in terms of national security. With that being said, you know, Rudy Giuliani obviously is in a very solid position to get the slot because he has been a Trump loyalist. I think, though, he does come with a bit of baggage, as does General Petraeus. So it becomes a little bit complicated as to where Donald Trump, what he's thinking of what he wants in terms of a top diplomat official.
There's a name that you haven't mentioned yet, but speaking of baggage, Mitt Romney. Where does he fit into all of this? The intrigue about these dinners where he's sitting there eating lobster puffs. Like this picture, he looked totally bewildered in this picture. What is going on here with Romney? Well, we lost audio.
You know,
she didn't want to talk about Romney.
But you bring up a good point in that there's been criticism over Mitt Romney, not just because he basically called Mr. Trump a con artist and hit on his character, but also because of their foreign policy differences. I think we have Mercedes back with us.
We got the satellite back, Mercedes. We were asking about Romney.
It was the Russians, I tell you. The Russians took me off the...
So what do you make of that?
On Romney, you know, I find that there's parts of it in terms from the public standpoint. For example, the grassroots, those who have been Trump loyalists, have sent a clear message to Mr. Trump saying, we don't want Romney as Secretary of State. He insulted you. He was obviously one of your most outspoken critics in the campaign trail. But what I have seen and what I've enjoyed seeing in this process is the fact that Trump has taken the time to meet with Romney, to have that discussion. And I think that has actually been a positive step in helping to heal the party, the Republican Party.
Just quickly, what are the chances that there may be someone in the mix that we don't even know yet?
You know, it's interesting. We just heard the name of Rex Tillerson, who is the CEO of Exxon, as being a potential dark horse. I think that's unlikely. I think the names that you're seeing are possibly would be the picks.
All right, Mercedes Schlapp, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All eyes on the State Department. All right, when it comes to immigration, Democrats have praised the background check system, but what if we told you it was never turned on?
And a major clash between the Clinton and the Trump campaigns as the Clinton camp accuses its challengers of winning on white supremacy. Did Democrats learn anything from the election? A fair and balanced debate is coming up.
Singing, we will rock you.
25 minutes now after the hour. Back with some quick headlines. Could the deaths of 13 people killed in the Tennessee wildfires been prevented? Authorities now under fire for never setting the evacuation alert to cell phones. The National Weather Service saying evacuations are not included in the wireless emergency alert system, but officials say they are looking at making changes. And another deadly campus attack. A student in custody this morning accused of stabbing a professor to death. The attack happening in the University of Southern California Psychology building. Officers finding Professor Bosco Chan dead of multiple stab wounds. Police now saying the student targeted that professor. Pete, over to you.
Bad story. All right, a campaign clash in the post-election between Clinton Communications Director Jen Palmieri and Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway.
I would rather lose than win the way you guys did.
No, you wouldn't. Do you think I ran a campaign where white supremacists had a platform? You going to look me in the face and tell me that?
It did. Kellyanne
really?
did.
Do you think you could have just had a decent message for the white working class voters? Do you think this woman who has nothing in common with anybody? How about it's Hillary Clinton? She doesn't connect with people. How about they have nothing in common with her?
Well, is that just proof that Democrats don't want to accept the real reason that they lost the election? Here to debate for a fair and balanced debate is Trump supporter Brunel Donald Che and 2008 campaign advisor and Fox News contributor Jamu Green. Good morning to both of you. Brunel, I want to go to you first.
Good morning.
Have they not learned? Good morning, and God bless you as well. Have they not learned the lessons of this election, or are they, are they going to go on in perpetuity blaming it on race?
They have not learned the lesson. Donald J. Trump, our president-elect, and Mike Pence, our vice president-elect, ran on a campaign of bringing Americans together. They ran on a campaign of America first, and that is why they won. They did not divide us up as we have been divided up in the last 8 years. They got the votes of different genders, different races, different creeds, different religions. And they did so by talking about the things that make Americans, think. The economy, education, build that wall, Second Amendment, NAFTA deals, all the things that if you're an American, you're concerned about. And so had the Democratic Party spoken to Americans about the issues that we are concerned about, Hillary Clinton might be the one going in on January 2017 and not Donald J. Trump, our president-elect.
Jammu, we heard that they were Trump supporters were a basket of deplorables who were every ism in the book. It sounds like that's exactly what the Clinton camp thought as well.
Well, this was a post-election assessment that is done every year at Harvard. I think it makes perfect sense for people who gave 2 years of their life and more years probably for many of them to an effort that actually had more voters vote for their candidate than the person who won. Around 2.5 million, I think, is where we're at.
Well, in the wrong places,
right now.
but sure, yes.
But it makes perfect sense for them to still be passionate about the issues that they thought weren't covered or how they were covered. What we need to do right now is move forward as a country that is not divided, and that's where I agree with Brunel.
I mean, passion is one thing. Passion is one thing, but is there no introspection? Is there no reflection that, hey, maybe we had a flawed candidate or a flawed approach, or we weren't talking on the issues? Instead, they're blaming the other side of racism. No introspection at all?
I think there's a lot of introspection that's going on and should go on both sides, should go on within the media. But when it comes to assessing what we just went through with the 2016 presidential election, it would be completely flawed to negate the impact of white supremacy.
Okay, so Brunel,
if I may respond to that,
please.
What I would say is this. Steve Bannon is a patriot. He is an American citizen who saw our jobs going overseas, leaving our country. He saw that Americans were being mistreated, treated like second-class citizens in our country, and he got on board the Trump train. The same reason I got on board the Trump train. I wanted to put America first. So did Steve Bannon, okay? The only party that I believe that he is concerned with as a nationalist is the TPCC party. Tired of politicians, corruption, and classism. If that makes him a racist, if that makes me a racist, then sign me up. But Americans, we're tired of the dividing. We're tired of the hurt. We want to heal, and that's what we're going to do under our Vice President-elect and our President-elect Donald J. Trump. We're going to move forward in the future as Americans, as a nation, healing.
Jamil, we only have a couple of seconds here, but how would you respond to that? She's saying we're appealing to the common values and virtues. That's not racism.
Yes.
Look, no. I mean, it's hard to respond to a diatribe like that. The reality is,
it's easy when you're a patriot. It's easy when you love this country.
We had white supremacists more engaged in this president election than we've seen in our lifetime. That's a fact. Now, do we need to move on from that? Of course. As Democrats, do we have to assess how we can better communicate our message? It was very difficult to get any sort of message out in the atmosphere where Donald Trump sucked up all the oxygen. Well, that's the reality. That's not what we should be talking about this morning, though. I think we should be talking about how we move forward responsibly. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that level of responsible actions.
We're gonna have to leave it right there. Jamil and Brunel, thank you very much.
God bless you and God bless America.
God bless you both. And God bless America.
Amen.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, God.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
You can say the New York Times was a little biased during the election season. You know, we just talked about bias in coverage. Maybe there was an organ of the media that was a little bit biased toward Hillary Clinton, and it's called the New York Times. And our friend Tucker Carlson just confronted their editor about it.
Democrats, students, and foreign allies face the reality of a Trump presidency. Now, if you substituted Trump presidency with, I don't know, terminal cancer diagnosis, it would not change the meaning of this.
The only way Tucker Carlson knows how to do it in style. Wait until that editor's response next. And it's a 25-year tradition now in danger of going extinct. Nearly half of the graves at Arlington National Cemetery could go without a wreath on Christmas. But But there is one thing we might be able to do about it to prevent that. Stick around. It's next.
My brothers are all black and white. Yep.
And welcome back to Fox and Friends on this Saturday morning. I think over the past few months, it's no secret that we played a lot of headlines from the New York Times where they just seemed out of touch with the rest of the country. And then they came out a few weeks ago and seemed to strike a bit of a conciliatory tone in a way where they think that, you know, it was as if they realized, okay, we need to reassess some things.
It was a half apology as they bleed readers and they bleed on their balance sheet. They said, well, we kind of apologized, but we actually felt like we weren't that biased, except they know internally, if they're being honest, right? They had their finger on the scale the entire election.
So our own Tucker Carlson, in only the way that he can, had their public editor on his show last night and took them on head on. Watch this.
It makes no sense to me in terms of what the New York Times claims it is and wants to be. And as you say, their business model. Why would you cut off half of America and make them feel like this is not their New York Times? That comes from being in New York, being in a certain circle, and seeing the world a certain way, not being in touch with people who don't live like them or don't live in cities, and who are the ones that elected like Donald Trump to the presidency.
Now, when you say that the journalists who walk in the front door of the Times building are doing their best to be fair, I would believe you, except I know for a fact that's not true because I read their Twitter feeds. Here's one. This is November 15th. Pardon me for asking, but what qualifies Jared Kushner to have a seat at the presidential table? Huh. There's Eric Lipton, another reporter. White House's QVC. It has started. Here's Peter Baker. For a new president from reality television, a cabinet selection that resembles a pageant. Are you kidding? These are news reporters saying this stuff?
Everybody's going to have their personal political views. We all do, but they ought to be personal. And if you sign up to be a journalist, then that's what you ought to be.
Interesting. You know, I mean, I gotta be honest. I mean, she was fairly forthright at the beginning in saying, "Hey, we do live in a bubble. You live in New York. You see the world differently from Americans that elected Donald J. Trump."
In a high-rise building in a New York City skyscraper, looking down on the rest of the world. Yeah, it's a different world out there.
Can you imagine that job, though? The public editor of the New York Times. Your job is to look at the reporters and the coverage of the paper and critique it, and you realize how wrong you got it, and you got to listen to everyone at the paper when the paper's been so biased, and you know it, but they employ you. Not an easy
And that's why Tucker Carlson's so good, because he digs a little deeper and says, well, hold on a minute. Let me just go through their actual Twitter account. I'll read them publicly exactly what they've written.
I love it.
That was well
done, Tucker Carlson, as always.
All right, we do have some other headlines to get to, and we start with this: an embarrassing flaw in the U.S. immigration system so bad that it now has all new citizenship ceremonies on hold. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goldblatt, demanding an immediate investigation after immigration officials found what's being called a major security flaw in the electronic system used for background checks. And apparently that system has failed for a number of people seeking citizenship. Goldblatt is now asking Homeland Security to find out just how many people have slipped through the cracks. And Democrats digging trenches, signaling they may block President-elect Donald Trump's nomination for Secretary of Defense. Retired Marine General James Mad Dog Mattis needs to get a waiver in order to take on that new position since he left service just 4 years ago. They need to be out, what, Pete, over 7 years? Yep. So Senator Kristen Gillibrand says the Dems are ready for a fight on this. 8 Democrats would need to join the Republicans to reach the threshold of 60 to approve of that pick. And this is a story that sparked national outrage. The college that banned the American flag from campus now flying our symbol of freedom once again. The president of Hampshire College in Massachusetts first lowered the flag to mourn Hillary Clinton's election loss, well, then later took down that flag after it was set on fire when President-elect Trump won. But after 2 weeks of protesting, the president did change his mind, saying the flag can, in fact, fly at full staff, but only because he wants hate threats to stop.
So they use the flag to mourn. It sounds like she died.
That looks like a hate threat right there.
Yeah.
Also, why do I not feel
I hate that story.
Why do I not feel like James Mattis is scared of a trench from Kristen Gillibrand? I think it'll be okay. Yeah.
I think so, too. I think you're right about that.
Fine, yeah.
All right, well, it is a 25-year tradition, and now it is in danger of going extinct.
Tens of thousands of graves at Arlington National Cemetery could go without a wreath on Christmas.
But you can change that. And here to explain is Wayne Hansen, a Vietnam vet and the chairman of the Board for Wreaths Across America. Sir, thank you for joining us this morning. It's such an honorable mission that you have. Tell us about what you do and the shortfall that currently exists.
Well, as you know, Wreaths Across America is a nonprofit organization that reaches out to honor and remember our veterans buried not only just at Arlington, but in 1,200 locations across the nation. But our concern right now is with Arlington. I consider that our nation's national cemetery. And right now, we're looking at a shortage of sponsorships for about 68,300 wreaths in order to allow us to cover every marker and at the columbarium.
What is the response when you hear from families who get to see these wreaths?
It's amazing what it means to those people when you see them down there. They're the ones that are not able to come to Arlington, and they see that volunteers come out by the thousands to help us put those wreaths down and honor and remember their veterans for their service and sacrifice.
Wayne, what can people do? What can we all do to make sure that every one of our fallen soldiers has a wreath on their gravestone?
Right now, it's just a matter of reaching into those purses and pocketbooks and taking out $15. It's only $15 to sponsor a wreath, and we need a little over 68,000 more sponsorships to make sure that all those wreaths coming down from Maine will be placed on those markers at Arlington and that nobody will be forgotten.
If you go over to foxandfriends.com right now, we have very generous viewers who will support for that flag alongside the American sniper Chris Kyle. He's here with what those protesters don't understand.
And you've heard about President-elect Donald Trump delivering on a campaign promise to save 1,100 American jobs at the Carrier plant in Indiana. But wait until you hear one of the personal stories from one of those workers and what it meant to him personally. It's an incredible story, and that's next.